Good morning, everybody. How are you all today on this wonderfully cold Sunday? I hope you all had safe travels in, and I had to stay at my sister-in-law's house all weekend because out in Hayworth, the roads are really not good, and we had to trek out there yesterday, actually, and Dennis was so kind to take me out there, and we had to go through the snow, and he's got four-wheel drive, but my minivan would have never made it, so I would have been stuck out there, and then Karin would have been preaching today, because I wouldn't have been here, but thankfully we got in, and we're here, and so I'm, woo, yes, yeah, that was Karin, but I'm super excited today to bring the message to you, and let's get started. I have an interesting story about cough syrup, and actually it's giving cough syrup to children, but children's cough syrup, not like adult cough syrup, because that would be bad. And so I have, goodness sakes, hold on, bear with me here for a second. My ear's not cooperating. There we go. So 2 weeks ago, my youngest daughter, Maya, she got sick and had a horrible cough, had the fever, the runny nose, the whole bit. Everybody's been getting sick. And I had cough syrup to give her because she's coughing her head off. She's not getting rest. And if you don't get any rest, you're not gonna sleep. You're not gonna get better. That means you're not gonna go to school, and you're gonna be home with Daddy because Lindsay's over in Peoria with Levi right now. And so that's where we're at. So I'm like, you got to take your cough syrup, kiddo. So I pour it out. It's like literally 5 milliliters, right? 5, little bit, not much. But cough syrups just don't taste very well, any of them, even adult, children. Doesn't matter how much sugar they throw in there, it just doesn't taste well. And so I'm trying to give it to her, trying to do this, and she's like, I'm not doing this. I'm not gonna take it. And she's like taking little like sticking her tongue in there, like, nope, not happening. And I'm like, at this rate, we're going to have it down by the time you're ready to take the next dose, right? Because they're like 4 to 6 hours, and it's going to take you 6 hours to get this down. And so I'm like, you just got to swallow back. I'm sorry. I'm going to readjust this because it's just not staying on, and I might be moving too much, too. Bear with me here. Okay, we'll try that. My head is sweaty, and I'm doing this too much. And so I'm giving it to her, and she's not going to take it. And I'm like, sip, 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 sip. Well, a couple days later, she finally started to take it. But she started feeling better, and then Madeline gets sick. So now I've got kid number 2 who is sick at home. And, of course, Dad is home because Mom is over with Levi over in Peoria. And so I'm playing the single dad life thing going on, and I'm giving cough syrup. But Madeline, now she's a champ. Okay, she's like, all right, I know this is bad. She's got to take twice as much as her sister. She's got to take 10 of it, not 5. And she's like, I'm just going to throw it back, gulp it down, do that little shake, you ever seen, like, even adults do it, right? Like, when you're taking medicine, that's just how it works. You shake, and you give that weird look, and then you go on about your business, right? And so I gave it to her, and she threw it back, and she took it, and she shook it off, and whatever. Well, I told you that story, and you're like, what does that have to do with our sermon, and where are we at, and what are we doing? And I'm going to tell you. So basically, today you're going to take your medicine, and you're going to take it, you're going to throw it back. All right? So we're not going to, yeah, I know everybody's clapping at me, and I'm still messing with this thing. I'm about to just grab a mic because it's not wanting to stay on me. But we're going to throw it back. We're not going to sip it. Sometimes I think when we have things that happen, in our lives, we just tend to sip, and God tries to tell us things. Thank you. And we're doing that, but we just sip, and we just try to, like Maya, and we're just trying to get a little taste. But the thing that God's trying to teach us is going to help us. It's going to make us better. It's going to give health, right? And so we're trying to do that, but he's just like, you just need to throw this back. You just need to gulp it down, shake it off, and give that face, take what I'm trying to tell you, and go, right? And so that's where we're at. That's where we're getting at with relationships today. And what I want to talk about is the self-centeredness, which is us, right? So when I say self-centeredness, I'm talking about you. I'm talking about me. I'm not talking about the person next to you. I'm not talking about somebody in your mind that you're like, ooh, they need to hear this because they're really bad at relationships and they're all up my business. No, we're not going there, okay? When I say self-centeredness, I mean us. And that's when I'm talking about taking that cough syrup, right? Taking that medicine. Because sometimes, a lot of times, let's just be honest, when we are dealing with ourselves and we have to look at ourselves as the problem, maybe, possibly, right? Just a little bit. We get all crazy and we're like, no, I'm just going to sip this medicine. I'm just going to leave that alone, right? But there's health on the other side of it, but we got to take it. And so we're going to look into some passages today, and there's going to be some craziness, and we're going to connect it all back together. But the big thing here is that self-centeredness, which is us, ourselves, our sin, the self-centeredness of sin and how it affects all of our relationships. Sin separates us from God first and foremost, but it also devours our relationships, and that takes us to the main idea. And the main idea for today, and I want this to be in your head while I'm speaking, is since relationships are about being other-centered, so that's a key word, other-centered. They're about other people, holding them in a high regard, valuing them, right? Not the, what can I get out of this relationship for me? And this is not helping me, and this relationship is not benefiting me, and I have all these me issues and self issues with this relationship. But that's not what they were meant to be. We're supposed to be other-centered in our relationships, and so we should be looking at the other person. And so today we're going to focus on ourselves and what we're bringing into the table. So since relationships are about being other-centered, the self-centeredness of sin will inevitably subvert, and that's a cool word, because it means undermine, the power and authority or overthrow. So that's what that word means, of God's design. So that's an interesting way to put that. But it does. When we put the self-centeredness of sin and our self there, it throws off everything that God designed. It overthrows all of that, and we are then in charge of what's happening. So I wanted to start with a passage about Paul, because I love Paul. I love to look at his story. But I also wanted to look at his words here in Romans chapter 7, verses 21 through 25, because it shows us, it paints this beautiful picture of the struggle. And so I want to read this to you because it's going to set up where we're going. So Paul says this, "So I find this law at work. Although I want to do good, evil is right there with me." I'm going to pause there because most of us can attest to that. You know, you have that good thing, you have these good intentions, these good motives, you see the good that's there, and you want to go for it, but there's that thing, it's sitting over here, and it's pulling you this way, right? And so this is Paul talking. He says, "For in my inner being I delight in God's law, but I see another law at work in me, waging war against the law of my mind, and making me a prisoner of the law of sin at work within me. What a wretched man I am. Who will rescue me from this body that is subject to death? Thanks be to God who delivers me through Jesus Christ our Lord." Then he says, "So then, I myself in my mind am a slave to God. But in my sinful nature, my selfish nature, in myself, am a slave to the law of sin." And so this is Paul, the guy that, the Apostle Paul, the guy that wrote a lot of the New Testament, okay? He's writing this in Romans. He's the same guy that, was a murdering, crazy Pharisee guy who wanted to, he was cutthroat, to say the least, but he wanted to kill Christians, and then he was changed. God met him. He had this awesome story, and he was converted, and he wanted to spread the gospel, and he proclaimed the gospel with great tenacity. But this is him writing, talking, and he's saying, look, the struggle is real. I get it. Like, the struggle is real, and I'm sure all of us can attest to that. The struggle is real, and we have this tension going on in our lives. We have God, and we have ourselves. We have what we want to do and how we think we can make ourselves feel better and protect ourselves and all of that. And then we have God over here saying, no, this is the right way. And Paul, who's a great hero of the Bible, he can attest to that struggle. There's a tension. But he knows where his hope is, his rescue comes from. He says that in the verse. He talks about his rescue in there, and he says, "Thanks be to God who delivers me through Jesus Christ our Lord." So he goes back to Jesus. He remembers, wait, my salvation is in Jesus, my relationship is in Jesus, all my relationships should flow out of Jesus, and he is the one that rescues me from this tension of myself and doing the good thing that God wants us to do. And so he goes back to that because he knows the struggle. And it's real. He gets it. And so that's going to set up the passage, our main passage, which is in James today. And it really paints that beautiful picture. You're going to see it when we read that first verse about what the struggle is. That's the struggle we're talking about. But the thing is James, the book of James, if you ever read it, or you have read it, because I'm not saying that you haven't read it, but if you read the book of James, he's not really sugarcoating anything. He doesn't really pull his punches. He's the kind of guy who's like, you're going to take that medicine, and you're going to throw it back, you're going to swallow, you're going to shake it off, and you're going to go. okay? He's not you can sip it, you can take it down, or you don't have to take it right now, or, Mary Poppins, I'm going to put a spoonful of sugar on there and make the medicine go down kind of thing, right? That's not his way. So I want you to be ready, and like I asked, get ready to take your medicine, because he's going to throw us some punches here, okay? And so here's the scripture. Here's James. He's talking, and he says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? So right there, boom, he just said what Paul was talking about. Those desires that battle within us, that inner struggle, the struggle is real. Paul paints a beautiful picture about our inner thoughts and what's going on in our minds. James is pointing it out right here. What causes quarrels and fights among you? And then he points to these selfish desires, this sin, right, that's in there, this tension. He says, you desire, but you do not have. So you kill. You covet, but you cannot get what you want. So you quarrel and fight. It sounds like a big fit. I don't get what I want, so I'm going to quarrel and fight. And that's when I look at people that have relationship issues and when there's things going on, and I look at myself, and I've looked at a lot of the relationship issues that I've caused myself to have, it's just me throwing a big fit, to be honest. I'm just throwing a big fit because I didn't get my way, and I didn't get what I wanted out of that relationship in the moment, and it didn't please me, and so I threw a big fit, and I fought, and I quarreled, and I did some crazy things and said some really bad things. Because that's just where it's at. That's that tension, okay? So he goes on. He says, you do not have because you do not ask. When you ask, you do not even receive. You do not receive because you ask with wrong motives that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. So again, pointing back to your pleasures. There's a lot of self going on here. And James he's not pulling any punches. You are the problem. I am the problem in this scenario. And so when we look at, as we keep going on, he says, you adulterous people, you don't know that friendship with the world means enmity against God? Therefore, anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. And so I want to break that down a little bit, because this is an important part in this passage. But it's not talking about an enemy of the world like I hate the world and I hate the people in it and I just don't ever come out of my bubble. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about a friend of the world, because if you think about the world's mottos now, right, it's like, you need to get yours. I'm going to get mine, right? You do you, boo-boo, right? The younger generation would know what that means, okay? They're laughing. But they get it. Well, older ones too. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be offensive there. Because I'm older. I'm 29, going to be 30. That's right. So, but that's what the world is telling us. It's out there saying you need to take care of yourself because nobody else is going to or is willing to. I'm going to get mine. You need to get yours. And so that's when he's talking about friendship with the world. He's talking about falling in love with the culture and the ideas of our age. He's not talking about the people in the world. That's a big difference. We are called to love the people in this world. We're called to be in a relationship with them. We're called to fellowship with them and to be through thick and thin with them. But we're not called to fall in love with the world. We're called to love the people in the world. Okay, and so that's what he's talking about here. And so he goes on and he says, or do you think Scripture says without reason that he jealously longs for the Spirit he has caused to dwell in us? But he gives us more grace. That is why Scripture says God opposes the proud but shows favor to the humble. And so pride, I mean, anybody that's ever had a relationship issue, pride is one of those big killers of relationships, because it doesn't say I'm sorry. It doesn't ask for forgiveness. It doesn't even say I'm wrong. It's their fault. You are the problem, not me, because that's my pride, because there could be nothing wrong with me. Of course not. I am perfect in all my relationships. That's what that's saying, right? And so pride is a killer, and it's about self, and it falls in line with what we're talking about, what Paul was struggling with, the real struggle that's out there, and what James is talking about. Pride right there, front and center. And so then he goes on and he says, submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Come near to God and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. And I mean, he's laying it on thick. He's just calling you out, calling me out in this passage. But that word double-minded, it's just an interesting word choice, double-minded. Because if you think about what Paul was dealing with, that tension of there's this evil, this thing that I want to do that's myself and that's sin over here. And then all the way over here, I've got God and the good, and I want to do that. And that tension that we live in between trying to do that, you talk about being double-minded. That's where we're at. I don't know about you. I mean, in my relationships, there's times where I'm like, I know what I should say when I'm talking to my wife, and I know I should just be quiet and listen. But there's that one little thing that I want to get in there that I've got to get it in there. And so I throw it in there, and boom, goodbye relationship conversation in that moment, right? And then I look back, and I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that looks back over those, and I'm like, okay, how could I have said that differently? But the thing is like, most of the time, it's never how could I have said that differently? God's like, hits me upside the head, and he's like, this is what you should have done. And not only should you have done that, I told you to do that, and you knew to do that in the moment. And the thought crossed your mind, but you're double-minded, and so instead you went the other way, and you decided to throw that little bitty, but this is my opinion, and you need to listen and agree with me statement, whatever that may be. And then it blew up. It imploded my conversation or my relationship in that moment, okay? And so that's what he's talking about. You double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. And so that sounds kind of, he says grieve and mourn and wail and take away your joy and all these things. But what he's really talking about there, and this whole passage here, submit yourselves then to God, he's just talking about forgiveness. He's talking about giving yourself to God. He's talking about that first relationship that's broken when we sin and when ourselves get in the way is between us and God. We think back to the garden, and they decided that they knew better and they wanted to eat the fruit, and so they did. And so then it broke that relationship with God. And then after that, relationship problems happened between them too. And so our relationship with God is first and foremost, and we have to remember that. It's priority number one. And so James here is saying, you gotta submit yourselves to God. You have to humble yourselves. And that's when I was talking about pride. Pride doesn't let you submit to somebody. Pride doesn't say, I don't need it. It says, I don't need anybody, which means I don't need God either. And so he can't help me. He can't fix my problems. I will fix my problems. And so James is laying it out. He's like, look, just submit to God. Just take the medicine. Would you just please take the medicine so we can just get this move on with our day, right? And so just take it. Ask for that forgiveness. Submit yourselves to God. And go on and move on into this beautiful relationship with him, but also with the people around you. He's going to help you, and he's going to take away that equation, that's self. He's going to try and help you get rid of that so that you can be with the people and love on them. And so James lays that out beautifully, and he just tells you what you need to do. Resist the devil, and he will flee. That double-minded thing, and he starts saying, no, you need to take care of yourself. You need to do this. You resist it in God's power, and he goes. He leaves, the devil leaves, and then you rejoice in that victory with God, and you be with God, and then he helps you with all the relationships that go this way. But first, we got to get this going. We got to get this right. We got to submit to God. And so then James goes on. And so once he's talked about humbling yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up, then it's curious. He starts talking about us and with each other. He says, brothers and sisters. I don't know. I don't talk like that, so I don't go up to people. Some people do, and my kids actually do this. They call each other brother and sister and stuff. And so Madeline will, instead of saying Nathaniel, it's always been brother. She's like, brother, come here. Brother, come do this. Brother, do this, do this. And so the more I think about it, I'm like, okay, is she going to be like 20 and he's going to be 22? And it's going to be like, brother, come here. Like, is she ever going to use his name? I don't know, because my kids just call each other brother and sister. And so that's just how it works. I got people shaking their heads saying, no, it doesn't get any better. They're just going to say that. It's just how their language is going to be. So there you go. So, so brothers and sisters, do not slander one another. Don't be talking smack about people, is what he's saying. Don't be talking smack about no one, because you got your own stuff going on, right? And we got to look at us first. So he says, don't slander one another. Anyone who speaks against a brother or sister or judges them speaks against the law and judges it. When you judge the law, you are not keeping it, but sitting in judgment on it. There is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. But you, who are you to judge your neighbor? I love that line. Again, like I said, he don't pull no punches. He likes to give it to you straight. But this is a beautiful part of the last ending of that passage in James chapter 4, verses 1 through 12, if you want to go and read that through the week. But this law that they're talking about, that James is talking about here, it goes back to Jesus. in Matthew and Mark, in the Gospels of Matthew and Mark, he talks about the Pharisees come before him, and they're like, hey, man, because they know, like, they're keepers of the law. They're really religious, and they knew, like, all 600 and something laws and whatever was going on there. And so they were going to test him and be like, hey, look, what is the best, the grandest commandment there is? And they think they're like, we're going to trap him, and he's going to get all fumbled up, and we're going to, as if you could trap Jesus in, a conversation here. But that's what they're trying to do. And so they say this, they come before him, and Jesus is like, look, you need to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. And then you got the second, that's the greatest. And the second is this, you got to love your neighbor as yourself. So you got to love God, and you got to love people. And then in Matthew, it says, he talks about, and he's like, all the laws and the prophets, they rest on these two things. It's all summed up with this. And so basically all of those laws that they have memorized and they have people like, executed on because they missed a step or something on the Sabbath or whatever these crazy laws they're talking about. He's like, everything that the prophets and the laws talked about, they can be summed up and they kind of hang on these two things right here. This is the greatest commandment, and here's the second. Love God and love people. And it's not just love God partially or, 75% or even 99%, because a lot of us will hit that 99% and there's that one little percent that just doesn't go over. He's like, no, you got to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And that word strength means everything we do. Our work, our relationships, all of that. We're putting effort into that. It takes strength to be in this life and to move on and get through the day. And so it's like, you got to love God with everything you got. And then you got to love people. And so when it's talking about the law, James is talking about you're judging the law, and this is the law, and you speak against the law, but now you're sitting in judgment on it. That's the law he's talking about. He's like, when you're slandering each other, you're talking bad, talking smack, and you got to get that little opinion in there, and you got to cause some issues, and it's about me, about self, that self-centeredness, that, none of you have an issue with that, but we are in judgment of that law, of what Jesus said. Love God, love people. And so where does that bring us? Where does that leave us? What does that look like? How does that all connect to relationships with other people and our relationship with God and how we walk through this world? Where are we at? Well, I'm going to read a couple things, and they, I'm sure, nobody's ever experienced these or said these things, but I'm going to read them, and you can just nod your head or you can raise your hand, be like, amen, yeah, I've done that, or whatever, however you want to respond to it. But the first one is, I thought I was important to you. No one's ever said that to anybody else. But the idea there, where that comes from, and this is where it all starts to connect and come back, we got to love God, we got to love people. We got to make our relationship with God first and priority number one. And then it starts to affect other people if it's not. Well, this right here, that statement, I thought I was important to you, and you might not have ever said that, but I know there have been times in my life where that's what my actions are saying to somebody in my life, and that's what my other words are trying to say. It's like, I thought you valued me. I don't feel valued. I don't feel there's anything going on. But the thing is that statement, sometimes that twistedness of that is a self-centeredness versus a God-centeredness. Because I thought I was important to you means I'm finding myself in that. But if I am God-centered, then I'm important to God and God is important to me, then that struggle and that relationship, that should lift that out. Because then it isn't, I thought I was important to you. It's, I'm important to God and God has me in this relationship, and so now I'm going to work through this struggle with you. And I'm not going to hold on to that self-centered, I've got to feel value in this. Okay? So the next one goes along with the self-centeredness versus God-centeredness. But it says, I was just trying to protect my own rights. And yes, we live in a great country. And we have rights, and it just, it's a wonderful place to live. And yeah, politicians can talk back and forth, and we have, disagreements, and we all have opinions. But at the end of the day, I love my country, and I love where I live. But sometimes when it comes to just, we feel the right in a moment, and it gets rid of God-centeredness versus self-centeredness. Because I have the right to feel this way in the moment, and you have said something to me or done something to me, and we've had this bad relationship, we've had this bad exchange, and so now it's all about me again. because I have been offended. And God is nowhere to be found. Because if I'm centered in God, then those things can roll. They can roll right off the back. They don't affect me near as much because I find my value in God. I am centered on God. And so that's where we find that. And so we're not so self-centered where I've been so wounded because I'm so important to myself. And if I don't have myself, I have nothing. And you see people's lives crumble because of that. Because they're looking for everything in the wrong place. And so that twist there is talking about that self-centeredness versus God-centered life. Here's another one. If you really loved me, then you would do the things that please me. People might not say it that way, but I'm sure there's been times where that's come out of people's mouths or has been your thought or whatever. And you know what? It's funny though, because that's self-rule versus God rule. If God is the ruler of my life and he's in charge, then people don't have to do the things that I want to do. They don't have to do the things that please me because God's in charge. And so I'm listening to God and I do what God tells me to do. And so I don't have to be large and in charge in my relationships. That means people don't have to listen. They don't have to do the things that please me. I'm not their boss where they're trying to get a promotion or something. But sometimes when our relationship with God is broken and self-rule creeps in there, this can be our mindset. And that's the thing, is that we got to love God and we've got to love people. But those don't work when we have that self-centeredness of sin, that selfishness. It's on us. Yeah, there might be things going on with the other person too, but we have to look at ourselves first and figure out what are we doing that's not lining up with God, and how can we be other-centered in that relationship. And then we go from there. Here's another one. If I need your help, I'll ask for it. I like our friendship. I just don't like your help. So that is like self-sufficiency all the way versus God's sufficiency. Obviously, yes, we want to be self-sufficient. We want to be able to, leave the nest when we're, going to college or we're getting a job and whatever, and eventually leave wherever we were and get on our feet and get a job and, have a career. And, if you want to, if God has you have a family and all those things, right? So we want to be able to be self-sufficient in those kind of things. But this is not speaking to that. This is talking about in our relationships. We are self-sufficient. And so when people come along you and they want to help you and you don't ever let them help you, that's going to cause distance in there. That's going to cause issues. And then you turn around and you think, where is everybody at? Why doesn't nobody ever want to help me? Why are they not here where my problems are going crazy? Because you've been talking to them like, I don't need your help. I don't need your help. I don't need your help. So they listen to you. That's a concept. They listen to what you were saying, and then now they're further out there because you are self-sufficient. You put that vibe off. I'm self-sufficient. I've got this. Pastor Scott Pershaw used to make fun of me because I used to say it all the time when I was a teenager. I got this. I got this, man. I'll be good. I got it figured out. I'm good, whatever. Thankfully, he saw through my lie and my immaturity in that statement, and several other people did, and so then they continued to help me along the way because when things came crashing down, I needed a lot of help. And my wife would probably say, I still need a lot of help. But that's for another topic, another day. So that one, self-sufficiency versus a God-dependent life. God is all I need. I depend on God for all that my cares come through, and then it allows me to then depend on other people when I need help, because God will send people to help you. We're supposed to love on each other, love God, love people. And so if, Kamani's got an issue and he's struggling and God's like, look, you need to go take him to lunch or go do something. And I go up and say that, and I'm trying to love on him and do that. And he's like, no, man, I'm good. I got this. I'm good. I don't need your help, whatever. He keeps saying that to me. Eventually, I might not be there. So then when something really, he's struggling with it and what's going on, he's like, where's he at? Where's Zach at? Well, you've been telling me to get over here. And God was telling me to come over here and help you. And so we got to remember that God will use people to help us. And if we're dependent on him, then we're going to see that. We're not going to be so self-sufficient that we don't see it and we just push people away. And then we wonder where they went. Here's another one. This one really stung me. After all I have done for you, this is how you treat me. And so there's some self-righteousness going on in that one, right? Because I am the standard, because if God isn't the standard, then something has to be the standard of my life. And guess what usually fills that void? Myself. Me, myself, and I. And you become the standard of your living. And so when people don't meet your expectations, and here's a little secret, people, that's just not how it's going to work. Like, if you set your standard and you're here, and you're always setting it here, and people are coming in here, there's always going to be issues. There's going to be tension. There's going to be problems in your relationships because you're so up here and you're so stuck in that self-righteousness that you've forgotten that God has a holy standard of living. He has a way that we want to live, and it's by his rule and through what he wants to do in our lives, and it's his standard. And so then we don't measure people by our standard, and every relationship we have is measured by what people can do for us and where we're at on our standards and if they live up to our standards or not. Because, man, a lot of people are going to fail because some people have some pretty high standards, and it's pretty far up there. And guess what? Sometimes you'll never meet that expectation, and that relationship will just keep going on and on and on until it either breaks and it's ruined and devoured, or that person just leaves. And it's then devoured again that way because we get in the way. So I hope you're seeing how what James is talking about, what causes quarrels and fights among you, the desires within you, what Paul's talking about in Romans. I struggle with this tension of wanting to do good, wanting to do the right thing, wanting to live for God, but also there's this self-centeredness, this sinful nature going on over here, that tension. You see how it comes down when we break that relationship with God, when we live for ourselves, when we are in charge. Man, our relationships start to get screwed up. This is not how I wanted this relationship to go. If I had known this was how it would go, I would have never even started it. Ooh, that one. Man, self-satisfaction. Like, I'm coming into this relationship, and I know what I want to get out of it, and I know what it's going to be, and whatever the reason was for getting into it. But then all of a sudden, when that thing is not there anymore, and it was so centered on a self-satisfied soul from what you were going to get out of that gratification from whatever was in that relationship, when that doesn't quite measure up and isn't what's going on, then it's like, see you later, bye, to our relationship, to that person. See you later, bye. I don't care about you, and I don't want to talk to you again. I got nothing to do with you because you didn't live up to my expectation there. You didn't satisfy me like I thought you would. And you can take that however you want. But that's what's going on there. So it's self-satisfaction versus fulfillment in God. Where do we find that fulfillment? Where do we find that significance in ourselves? It's to God. He fulfills us. He gives us that significance. Then, guess what? That takes all the pressure off of the people in our lives. That means when I'm talking to Lindsay and she's talking back to me and, she's having a conversation with me and she's like, man, he is failing left and right. He's not doing good right now. He's just having issues. He's just not meeting what I thought this perfect marriage was going to be. And there's like perfect marriage that just doesn't happen that way. But people have that expectation. And that's how they get their satisfaction. That it's going to be like this. And this is how I'm going to meet all those needs, is out of this perfect relationship where it's got me, Lindsay, my slew of kids, 4, which is the end of it, 4, a dog, a white picket fence, a little bit of land, nice house, stay-at-home mom, good job in the business world. You can find some satisfaction in that. And you can even have that as a dream. And that's nothing wrong to want those things and to dream that. But when that is all that you have, and that's all that you want, is parameters around that, and you can think of anything. It doesn't have to be just that. That's just me and Lindsay's struggle. When we were first married and things like that, and that we both had things that we wanted to satisfy ourselves with, and it set expectations. And come to find out, we couldn't do that. There was just issues. It fell short. Even when you got the kids and you got the house with some lands and the white picket fence is coming along at some point, right? And all these things. And yeah, it's good to go after and strive for those things. But at the end of the day, you take all that away, then what's left of your relationship? Just yourself and trying to satisfy yourself. And if there's none of that, and I'm not getting that satisfaction, then boom, goodbye relationship, right? Because we have to be satisfied in God. First and foremost, submit yourselves to God. James says it. Jesus said it. All the commandments, all the laws. Love God, love people. Love God, love people. So that's where that comes in. And this is where it messes our relationships up. When we get in our way, ourselves. It's not anybody else. And yeah, sure, everybody's got problems. And we're good at judging other people, as James is talking about. We're good, but we shouldn't do that. Who are we to judge them? Right? And so this last one, I don't need you to tell me what to do. A self-taught mentality versus God's humble, teachable spirit. And, that self-taught mentality of I don't need anybody's help and I don't need them to tell me what to do and they can't tell me what to do. That's where a lot of pride comes into play there, because then you don't listen to nobody. You are always the mentor and you are never mentored by anybody else. You are always the one that's giving advice and giving opinions like everybody wants to hear them because you think everybody wants to hear your opinions and wants your advice because you give good sound advice. And so you always give it. But man, the moment somebody tries to come into your camp and try to tell you something, it's not happening. I'm self-taught. I know what's going on. I know how to do me. I've got that figured out. You can't tell me what to do. There's a lot of pride in there, a lot of arrogance, a lot of issues in relationships when you do that because you're self-taught versus God's humble, teachable spirit. We should be teachable. We should be willing to learn from each other, right? Because there's things that you can teach me and I can teach you. And we have to be humble enough to accept that. Even sometimes when it hurts and we got to take the cough syrup and just swallow it and shake it out, right? It's back to those kids, my girls. I tell you what, they make great preaching points. But it is. We're trying to sip that cough syrup. Just give it a little sip, whatever. But man, with our relationships, it's bigger than that. There's so much at stake there with God and with other people. Man, when we're self-taught and we're letting this get messed up between God, then this starts happening with everybody else around us. Whew. Nobody can tell me what to do. So I want to read this to you because I think this is beautifully laid out. And I did not write this, but it says, sin turns us inward. When love of God is replaced by love of self, we see people either as obstacles that hinder our goals or vehicles that promote them. That kind of stings a little bit. Sinful self-interest turns the two great commands, love God, love people, upside down. I'm going to read that again. Sinful self-interest turns the two great commands upside down. Rather than loving God and using his gifts to serve others, other-centered versus self-centeredness, other than that, we love the gifts and use people to get them. Now, when I read that, I was like, whew, man, that's tough. Like that hits to the core of who I am and how I see my relationships and how I view what I'm doing in my relationships and how many times have I been in a conversation with somebody and I just needed to get out of the way so God could do something and I didn't because I had to get mine. I had to do me, right? You do you, boo-boo, right? But man, does that screw up our relationships. It just does because God can't work and we can't serve people with the gifts God has given us because we get in the way. And then, so you think that's tough. That was a rough passage when I read that. Like it makes you think about all kinds of stuff. But then they go on and they start giving some examples. And I want to share these with you because I'm like, man, that's so true. It says, for example, parents who crave good reputation view their children as tools to get it. Ooh, that's big. You ever gone to a kid's sporting event, like T-ball event, where you got 5 and 6 year olds there, and you got that one crazy parent that's screaming at the kids because their kid couldn't throw the ball across the infield because they're 5 and 6 years old? That right there, that self-interest that I've got to have a good reputation. And my kids, oh man, they are, as the family ministries pastor, hi, my name is Zach, and I'm the family ministries pastor. But as the family ministries pastor and the love I have for my kids and the kids that are in this church and the teenagers and the young adult and all of that, you want to mess a kid up, you want to mess those relationships up, you be that parent. You find your good reputation and your self-satisfaction in your kids and the way they do it, and every single time they screw up, even a little, you are going to ride them. You're going to be on them, and you're going to tear them apart. I'm a preach now, okay? So this, I tell you what, it just burns me up because that, you see that. A 6-year-old, of course he can't, she can't. They cannot throw the ball across the infield. No, and if they can, wow, that's great. There's good talent there, maybe. That might be the only time they ever threw it that far. But that parent can't find so much in their kids' accomplishments that then they're ruining that relationship because God isn't priority, And so you get those, you see it, and and I've been guilty of it where, Nathaniel could be playing something or Maya's doing something or Madeline doing, and they come home and they have a bad test score or something, and in a moment I have a choice. It's like, ooh, does that reflect bad as me as a parent? Does that look at my reputation? Like, are my kids not perfect? You know what I mean? And so then you have a choice. Do I lovingly say, well, what happened there? And have a conversation with them because I'm other-centered and I'm trying to build them up? Or do I say, what in the world are you doing? We studied over that. How did you miss that? We went over this 15 times and you still missed it. But I tell you what, it tears that relationship apart. And it goes on and it says, spouses who crave intimacy manipulate their mates to get it. Whew. I told you, you're going to have to take some medicine today. I warned you. It happens all the time. You find relationships with spouses or relationships that are outside of marriage too. Just relationships in general. Boyfriend, girlfriend, all that going on. And I got to get intimacy, and they have to love me. And that's how they show me love is by that, and I have to get it because it's myself, and it's my self-interest. And so they manipulate it to get it. It's broken. It's not how we're supposed to do it. People who crave success view others as either a means or a threat to their agenda. So either you can help me or you can't. If you can't help me, then you're useless to me. Especially, you get in the business world and the job world, and there's promotions and there's success on the line and there's money to be had. If those relationships are just viewed as agendas and ways to get to where you need to go, then that's all about you. And you are not seeing those people. You are not loving God, and you're definitely not loving people in that. That's what's happening. And you walk right over them. Or you use them, and then you dump them. It's like I just watched Jumanji, the new one. I watched the old one, too, when I was a kid. But Jumanji, it's such a funny movie. But there's this part where at the beginning, the dude is like the refrigerator. He's this, sports guy, the whole jock stereotype. And he's trying to get his buddy, who was his friend a long time ago, to do his homework because he can't pass. And if he doesn't pass, he doesn't get to play. And so all he's caring about is himself and getting to play and his reputation. And so he basically gets the dude to do his homework. And he's like, hey, man, thanks for, doing my homework, whatever. He kind of says that a little bit. But then the other kid is like Spencer. His name's Spencer. And he's like, well, hey, maybe we could get together sometime. And he's like, no, He's like, I got this thing, I got whatever. And he's like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. He's like, no, he's just using him. Like, he was a means to an end to get to where he needed to go. And just to success, to get on the football field. But we do that all the time with people, especially in the work world. We can do that a lot. And then it says, people who crave control are threatened by strength and gravitate to weakness. When I think about some relationships that I've seen and even been a part of where you just feel like, man, they really like to prey on me, or they really like to prey on these people. And they really like to go in there. And I look at, even my relationships. It's like, am I in this relationship with this person because I don't feel threatened by them? And I feel like, you know what? They'll never be able to threaten my success. They'll never be able to threaten my power. They'll never be able to threaten me and my talents and everything else. And so I hang out with the people that I know will always be second fiddle to me. Like, that's a thought I have to remember. I have to think about that because I'm about these people. I have to be about these people. I have to be for them. I have to love God and love people. But that happens a lot. You think about an abusive relationship. What's happening there? One person is domineering the other. And it doesn't have to be physical. It could be emotional. It could be even spiritual. It could be, just verbal always. But somebody, they've got to have that power. They crave it. That's the self in them. They got to have it. And so they always are surrounded by people who are they would view as much weaker than them because they can have that control then, right? And so this is crazy stuff, but it's true. I mean, Paul talked about that tension, that struggle that we all have, that even he had, a Bible hero. So if he had it, obviously all of us are going to struggle with this. It's just that's the struggle. But then James goes in and says, you got to submit yourself to God. And the quarrels and fights among you, it's happening because there's desires going on, that self-centeredness, right? And then we just went through a whole list of phrases and scenarios and things where this pops up because we don't even know. We don't even think about it. That parent that's yelling at their kid, I'm sure there's something in them. I'm hoping that there's something in there that checks them and they're like, ooh, maybe I shouldn't do this. But sometimes they're not even aware that I am literally just craving something and I'm getting it using my kids as that to fulfill that self, whatever that desire was, right? And so we have to be careful. We have to be aware, self-aware enough to know where this is affecting our relationships. Where does it hit you? Where does it hit me? And so with all of that, all those points and things going on, I want to go back to the main idea. And it just says this: since relationships are about being other-centered, the self-centeredness of sin will inevitably subvert, which is just overthrow, the authority of God's design. The band's going to come up and they're going to play a song. It's a wonderful song, but our main idea, you talk about overthrow God's design. Our relationships with people, we have to be willing to understand that we obviously play a part in a relationship because there has to be two in that to make that relationship work, right? Because if you're not even part of that and you just don't even, then there's probably not even a relationship to begin with, even if you're fooling yourself. And in our world today, social media, you think about it, there's a lot about this deep relationship with each other. But the thing is that when we look at that and we think overthrow God's design for what relationships are supposed to be, we look at Paul, that tension that we live in, the struggle. And we look at what Jesus said about loving God and loving people. And we think about what James wrote about what causes the quarrels and fights among us, what causes this relationship issues, and how we treat people. It's right there. The self-centeredness of sin, it's going to overthrow God's design because God's design wasn't that. It was to love God and love people, to serve people, use those gifts that he's gifted us with. And so whenever the things we want become more important than God, our relationships suffer. But here's another thing is even when we make relationships more important than God, our relationships suffer. Doesn't matter what is important to us. It's still us wanting it to be important. And even if relationships, they are number one with people, it's not God being number one. And so they're going to struggle and they're going to suffer because God is priority number one. We got to have that first. And then love people. So I'm going to leave you with just two questions. They're simple questions, but they're very personal. And that's what we're talking about today. Is my relationship with God priority number one? Is God all that I want? Is he everything? Not 99%, not 75%, not all my heart, my mind, and my soul, but not my strength. No, all of it. Everything I do is for God. Do I live for God? Have I given everything, submitted myself to God? And you could be walking with God for years, and he's had 50% of you that whole time. Because these relationship things, we get in the way. And then the second question is this. And it's up there on the thing, but are my relationships other-centered? relationships with people other-centered? Or are they self-centered? I think we have to take a long, hard look at what our relationships look like, who they're with, how we interact with people, and is there just this possibility, maybe, just slightly, that we are getting in there and we're causing the issue. Not looking at them and what their problems are, but looking at yourself, looking at me. Does Zach have any selfish tendencies, self-centeredness that separate me from God, but also put me in bad relationships and cause me to have bad relationships? So they're going to play, and the altars are always open for reflection if you want to, sometimes I feel like, for me, getting up and moving from one place to another, it just helps. But you can talk with God right in your seats too. But as they play, just ponder those questions. Think on those.